Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. The last video I recorded, which you can find on Patreon for free, it's always free, had a bad video issue. And so I wasn't able to get it up on the normal channel. I just didn't want to put up that. Plus it's kind of a darker episode about AI. But today, we're going to talk about something that I am about 2 weeks old knowing that it existed or that it was claimed to have occurred, which you can see in the title, the Aztec crash. Now, this is in New Mexico, and this is a town called Aztec, which was actually falsely identified as being Aztec ruins that they had found. It's a different Native American tribe that built it. And this is about 11 months, actually, sorry, not even that, about 9 months after the Roswell crash. What we're going to do with this is I'm going to cover the Aztec crash as much as I possibly can. And then we're going to review Roswell because they're kind of related cousins. And I think that Roswell comes with a lot more meat on the bones. This one has a very interesting lifespan. I mean, of all of the UFO things I've ever heard, this one is just weird. And it's probably why I hadn't heard of it. But what's interesting about it is it kind of begs the question of why are you allowed to hear one and not so much about another? Let's get into it. So March 25th, this is the average date they give it, 1948. You know, in midsummer the previous year, 1947, we get the Roswell crash. But the claim is, and we're going to get into where the claims come from, who published them, that kind of stuff, that this 100-foot disc comes into this valley, and it's sort of kind of wobbling like a leaf. It's got some problems. They said that the sightings had gone back several miles. It had gone over a local ranch. It kind of was coming in for what looked like some sort of emergency landing, and just sort of the layman human being interpretation of this is that it was being automated the way it landed. But it lands in this valley in the early morning, and a door opens up. And the way the story is told is that a bunch of oil workers, oil field workers, came in and looked at it, and they spent about 5 to 6 hours looking at it, and a door had opened up very quickly. And looking through the door, they could see a command center inside with 4 collapsed aliens at the helm, all wearing these silver outfits. These were not your, what do they call them? The Zeta Articuli gray aliens I've talked about so much on this show. These were similar but more bulbous heads, and they had what they refer to as nice eyes. And that meant not insect, not almond eyes like the Zetas have. Eventually, the military shows up, detains everyone. There's all kinds of claims about obviously being threatened by the government at that time. They'd already had a previous event the previous year, supposedly, and they were detained, told never to say anything. And apparently it went like that for a really long time. And then we'll get to like what very few people surfaced, but they did surface. And the story goes is that the military commandeered this location for 2 weeks to figure out what to do with the craft. But very quickly, the bodies were shipped out to preserve them, of course. And that's generally the first part of the story. The craft is 100 foot in diameter. They really kind of say 99 to 100 feet. I mean, who got the measuring tape out, right? And then around 18 feet tall. That it was, a disc with sort of a bulbous dome kind of incorporated into the disc, and then a smaller bulb at the bottom, which provides its landing capability, the egress. The actual physical location is known as the Hart Ranch, H-A-R-T Ranch, and that's about 12 miles north of this Aztec city. So kind of a similar situation in Roswell, not exactly in Roswell. Roswell has about 5 different locations that are prophesized as being the place where it landed. So now fast forward 1 year, and a journalist, quote unquote, for Variety magazine, that should be kind of an oxymoron for you, a guy named by the name of Frank Scully, gets a hold of this story from two other gentlemen and gets it published. Now, supposedly he gets the story right around the time, within the year 48, doesn't get published until 49, but then he writes a book where he aggregates a bunch of these different sightings at the time, which gets published in 1950. Now, the book is called Behind the Flying Saucers, and it just has lots of stuff in it. I haven't read it, of course. I'm not even sure you can get a copy of it, probably a PDF out there somewhere. And in that, he describes this event. Now, what's interesting about this is that the number of aliens inside the craft was originally reported as 16. And then it went down to 14. But we're going to hear some folks basically say there's only 4. One absolute side guy said 5. Now, to make this more romantic, it was the Air Force and the 5th Army Division that was the two military groups that descended upon this. But the story originates from these two guys, Silas Newton and Leo Gebauer. These two guys that basically told him the entire story, of which he used to print. Now, of course, you got Variety magazine. I mean, that's not exactly Time magazine. That's not Look magazine. It's definitely into sensationalism. Hollywood's really well within its prime in 48, meaning in terms of scandals and all that kind of stuff. Well, they were blowing them out in the 30s, right? Now, the problem is these two guys ended up getting convicted in 1953 of fraud. They were selling a mechanism that they call the doodle bugs, this little mechanism that if you used it on your land, you could find oil. And so that eventually caught up with them. And when they get prosecuted for fraud, Scully is toast in terms of his credibility with this story. At that moment, the whole Aztec crash story, his claim, both in the article in Variety and his book in 1950, collapsed in terms of any credibility. Scully's pretty cool. The gentleman was described as a fairly innocent guy who, they obviously say he's gullible because he fed into this, but honestly, if you're just trying to sell magazines, his editor was laughing all the way to the bank, right? Who cares if it's true? No one's going to get a chance to get on it and write it around. So could be true, could not be true, as long as people are interested. And apparently this book that he published in 1950 sold extremely well, thousands and thousands of copies, because that's what was, sort of coming into vogue. Now, these two gentlemen, this Newton guy and this Gebauer guy, ended up kind of getting cornered about the evidence. You say this is real. What's strange about it is I don't think they ever claimed they were there, that they had it as a secondhand knowledge, which means by the time Frank Scully gets a hold of it, it's third-hand knowledge. Now, this thing heats up a little bit after I get you the basic story. But they had submitted a piece of steel that they said came off the craft, which makes no sense at all because there's absolutely no version of the story where the craft itself had actually broken into pieces. Unlike Roswell, which had pieces and parts, Jesse Marcel, which we're going to get back into Roswell after this, he had boxes of parts. He showed it to multiple people who were weather balloon experts at Roswell. So this particular part of it was kind of funny because once they took that piece of steel that this Newton and Gebauer guy submitted, it was ordinary aluminum. Now, introduce a guy from True Magazine, C.P. Kahn. It's C-A-H-N. He's got an actual edge to his article, debunking. So he's the one that, in 1952, took this thing completely apart. Now, remember, this is 1 year before the two guys that said they witnessed this, or at least got the information about this, were convicted for fraud. And then he waits 4 years. So he publishes the original article in True Magazine in 52, just lambasting this entire story. Then 53, the two guys get convicted for fraud. And then 56, Kahn comes back and slams dunks it one more time. And then he starts to this narrative, which is interesting, which is debunking matters. You have to look at things and analyze the claims to make sure that you've got something, of plausibility, right? So let's stop right there, and let's analyze the story as we've heard it, because I'm going to get into a couple testimonies after the fact, and we're going to talk about a guy named Doug Newland, not to be confused with Newton, the other guy. Another guy by the name of Virgil Armstrong, who claims to be a Central Intelligence Agency guy who actually talks about the bodies. So let's look at this. You've got a craft that wobbles into the valley, supposedly lands itself. Now, somebody said that they thought it bounced off one of the ridges. You could see that, right? It would be not going to hurt the ship at all, but it bounces off one of the ridges. And of course, who knows if you could actually go up there and actually see any scarring from such a thing. It's been a really long time, folks, like 80 years, right? 78 years since that thing happened, or claimed to have happened. But you have a 100-foot wide craft. That's big. That's pretty darn big. Now, I looked it up. What was the widest aircraft in 1948? And it's one of the bombers that we had. It was 200-foot wingspan. So it's not like we didn't have hangars that could handle such a thing. And an 18-foot ceiling would definitely be well within a design for a hangar of a craft like that, of our normal bombers, okay, by 48. But they supposedly took over this thing for 2 weeks. I mean, we're just going to go with the claim, right? Now, they said that the way I originally heard the story was that all of it was taken to Los Alamos Labs, which is very close by. I don't know the miles offhand, but it's pretty close by. And that makes sense, because you're going to have to do night. You have to cover this thing up so that people flying by on personal planes, which I don't think was going on in 48 much, don't see it. You wrap it up, and you only move it at night. They could commandeer every single highway. If you're not part of America, there are two major highways that cut through the bottom part of the United States. The closest major interstate by Mexico is Interstate 10, and it goes all the way to, I don't know if it goes all the way to Florida or not, but above that parallel, up by Flagstaff, and Phoenix is kind of directly in the center, is Interstate 40. What we're talking about, I believe, all occurs on the 10, and that'd be a nice big fat highway to move things on. Now, of course, in 48, the 40 is actually called Route 66. I'm not exactly sure what the state of the 10 was at the time, but I'm pretty sure it was there. So wobbling that thing over to Los Alamos Labs makes sense. And in terms of the Army Corps of Engineers building a special hangar for it in 2 weeks, I think they could probably do it in 72 hours. Those guys are nothing shy of miracle workers. And there's a whole lot of other bases in the area at the time. It's interesting they didn't want to go to Roswell, which is more of, again, a more academic, at the time it was a weather balloon secret Air Force base. Not that it didn't have normal missions coming out of it, but the funny thing about Roswell and them saying it was a weather balloon is that all these scientists saw it first. They saw all the pieces and parts first, and they're like, that's not a weather balloon. We build those things. I don't care how top secret you want to say the weather balloon is. We would have built it, and that's not what it was. Now, they said that the bodies also went to Los Alamos, now maybe just to ice them down, but they probably would have learned a lot from Roswell. Let's have some capability of freezing these things down. It's not just some coffin for a child. But then the story kind of fragmented, and I think did some more research today, and it kind of leveled out where I think it makes more sense. They said they shipped the whole thing to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which I believe at the time was called Wright Air Force Base. But that's in Ohio. You're not going to move a 100-foot disc from Los Alamos Labs to Ohio. You just can't do it. I used to live in a state directly between those 2 points, and it would be an absolute nightmare to try to move that thing. You'd have to have some crazy storage during the day so no one could see this thing. And a 100-foot object is going to obviously consume any highway at that time, which probably would have had a maximum of 2 lanes going in one direction if you were lucky. Later, I found the claim had refined itself. No, the craft stayed generally in the area of Los Alamos, and of course, you could move it to something like the fabled S4 or the well-known Area 51. Potentially, you could. By now, if it really did exist, they could build underground facilities and that kind of thing. I would imagine it would have made it up to S4 in Nevada by now, by the 21st century. But they refined the story and said only the bodies were taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for study. Now, of course, the problem with this is that out of all of the workers that said they saw it, and I listened to an interview of a gentleman in 2003, his audio. And, if you've been BS'd in your lifetime, there's sort of a BS meter that comes with someone who's sensationalizing things. I have a couple, I wish I could have seen the video of it. When people wait that long to actually talk about an event that they witnessed, and they're not super polished, they're just answering questions. They're not like, when you have a person who has faked something, like when the astronauts talk about going to the moon, you just light that fuse and they talk forever until they get the script out. And then you're allowed to ask a few questions and then you're done. They've tried to answer all your questions with a pre-prepared version of the story that is based on the script they were given and then their embellishments as time goes on, which is why none of their stories ever match, right? Was there sound in the capsule when you land on the moon? Two guys in the same exact capsule. One guy's he's seen 2001, so he's go, no, there's no sound in space. No. And the other guy, oh yeah, it was deafeningly loud. Those kind of things, right? But what this guy said was, he was a worker, he was 19 years old, and he sees this craft kind of wobble into place. And they're all kind of like, what is that? And he said, right away, we didn't think it was UFO at all. We thought it was just an aircraft created by the government who had just dropped an atomic bomb. He thought, well, Manhattan Project, this is just another one of those projects, right? And it's in the middle of nowhere, so they're thinking just logically they're flying it in this area, no big deal. So I think that's an interesting admission that they're not like, oh, this is a flying saucer immediately. They said it was sort of a darker brushed steel color, and that when it finally kind of rested and they kind of circled around, and they say up to about 14 people were on the outside staring in, or at least staring at the object. He says no rivets or anything like that, which of course every man at that time, even a 19-year-old, would have seen a bunch of aircraft, Mustangs and bombers, B-17 bombers. They would have known, and no such thing. No rivets of any kind. So it starts to look kind of amazing, right? And this guy says, just matter of factly, he goes, that's when the door came down out of the bottom bulge that's on the bottom. And he said there was fire around the outside of the vehicle. And the guy asked him, well, what was on fire? He says, the trees. He goes, everything that it touched, it lit on fire. Well, if you think about the electromagnetic idea of a gravity well, sort of the tic-tac gimbal thing, which is definitely our technology, it would immediately burn all that stuff. It's not supposed to be touching organic matter. And of course, all of the testimonies of everyone that's ever been near one of these crafts, either in the organic outside where they came and went, or any type of military interaction, S4 claims by Bob Lazar, they will warn you that getting close to the vehicle could be deadly if it was turned on. And even with it turned off, time seems to kind of do a sluggish thing when you're by it. What is time? Time is just the rate of change of the mass energy model that you're in. So if something could slow down your mass energy but not kill you, you are going in slow motion, and time's going to slow down for you while everything outside is going a lot faster. So if something goes really quickly around you, then you're advancing through time much faster. But they always talk about this being much slower, which is the way you would actually control a vehicle, right? The universe is chaotic, a vehicle is not. And so you always are going to have this sort of slowed down time where you're going to be inside the vehicle for a few minutes, and when you come outside the vehicle, hours will have passed because it's got its own proprietary field inside. Otherwise, everything inside would die through the just changing directions and all that kind of stuff. But Doug Newland was the guy that said, they asked him, they said, how long did you have with the craft before the military came? And he said, I don't know, like probably 5 or 6 hours. And he goes, that door opened. And he goes, we looked inside and we could see some sort of command center inside and 4 collapsed bodies around it. And then the guy asked him, he said, look, well, who called the who notified the authorities? And he goes, well, I'm not sure. He goes, there's two possible candidates. He goes, well, the guy who owned the ranch may have called the authorities because no one had cell phones and no one was leaving. No one was interested in leaving at all. And you have to leave to get it. But a sheriff showed up. And the sheriff's got a radio. So done deal. And he said that the first 3 men that show up are officers. And they're in sort of an officer's kind of sedan. So no jeeps, no military with machine guns or anything like that. But then Doug says that they were all detained for hours. And this is an interesting claim because the most credible claims I've ever seen from soldiers that said they saw things, unless they were a part of the recovery group and debriefed the next day, if you were just a citizen that saw things, you were definitely held for a little while. And even soldiers who have picked up craft, or at least contacted craft, and I think it was Chile. One of the best ones I've ever seen is a soldier that talked about going down to find one that crashed in the side of a mountain because they thought it was just an aircraft. And they get down there after many hours of trying to get down this hill, and they found a craft that was oozing this stuff out of it. And he goes, that's when we saw multiple craft show up that were anti-gravity. All these American guys get out, and they're in these black outfits with no insignia. And this kid's telling the story. He's he's probably in his mid-30s when he was telling the story, but he was very kind of like FU kind of guy. He wasn't refined, he wasn't like these typical PSYOP guys that try to tell the story. This dude's just basically saying, this guy comes up and they're starting to cuss at us really quick. They're starting to put you in that mental trauma that you get when you get out of a bus at basic training. They're just in your face and screaming at you to break you down. That screaming is designed to basically give you the equivalent of like shock treatment, to hit you so hard your thoughts disappear and only their thoughts and their words blast into you. And of course, they shave your head down and get you ready for your first day, right? What the kid in Chile said was they put him in a Jeep type vehicle, which I think was one of his vehicles, and then they just kept jabbing him in the chest with an M16 and saying, you didn't see anything, creating trauma, creating blunt force trauma to the body, which is going to get your chemicals flowing in your body, and then they're programming your brain. And he literally said, F those guys, I'm going to say whatever I saw. I'm not adhering to any NDA or anything like that, which I just thought was an amazing interview. I'll try to put it up there. I think I've got it on the Deep Thoughts Radio website, a link to it. So the Doug Nolan guy basically says they were taken to another location and held and then eventually let go, but they were utterly threatened by their government not to say anything. And again, he doesn't apparently say anything until 2003. So 1948, 2003. That's pretty amazing. That's 55 years he waited to say anything. So if it's a hoax, and the military never showed up, but the military never threatened him, and he never had any NDA of any kind, and this thing gets published in a 1950s book that sells extremely well, why not come out right away that same year, 50, 51, 52, right before the True magazine comes out, right before the 1953 conviction on these other two guys that passed the story to Frank Scully, and make a buck? Not so much. So I think there's a little credibility there. There's a chance that that's true. Now, in 1999, prior to this 2003 interview with this Doug Nolan guy, the Virgil Armstrong guy comes out. Little interview. Looks like he's in some hotel room or something. And what he's claiming is that he was on the inside. So he claims he has basically the evidence of what happened to the 4 aliens. He says there's just 4. That's it. Now, what he claims is that there was one that was slightly taller, nearly 4 feet, but all the rest of them were about 3.5 feet. Again, he said they weren't the gray aliens, which are the Zeta Articuli folks. They are the nice-eyed folks, and they have more of a bulbous skull. They said that the standard claim, the ears had atrophied away, their mouths were in existence but inoperable, and the nose had atrophied away. I'm not sure why the nose would atrophy away. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess as long as you can get oxygen in your brain, you're okay. There's Whitley Strieber's claim that they actually photosynthesize with their skin, but they always wear suits, so that makes no sense, right? My head is breathing for me, right? But he said that they asphyxiated, as far as they could tell. They basically died of whatever environmental system that their normal ship puts out was failing, and that they had just died, and that they're most likely dead by the time the vehicle landed. It's a very interesting thing that it would land and open the door. I mean, I always thought that a lot of these craft that, who knows why UFOs crash if they exist, as we have said that they exist through people like Bob Lazar, who changes his story every 5 to 10 years. He really does. You just got to go back and listen to them all back to back, and you'll have a lot of doubt about his validity. Apparently, he's a really nice guy, a very mild-mannered guy. But, it's kind of a science fiction writer's that way, too. And he's given us a lot of entertainment. Let's just put it that way. But what this guy said was the suits that they had on, they couldn't get them off. They were like, we were trying to undo it, and we couldn't get them off. And they said they were trying to use scissors, and they just could not cut this. They said that they eventually got metal shears, and they could finally start taking these things off. And he said they had no skin. They had no hair on their body of any kind. He said all 4 of them were male. He said that 2 of them had, actually 3 of them had bars of some sort of insignia on their shoulders. And the weird thing about the Virgil guy was he was trying to liken the command structure of the vehicle to human ranks within the Air Force, right? So he was yammering off about ranks that obviously we have no clue what they would ever call the ranks. But their general belief, due to the height and insignia increase on the 4-foot guy, he was most definitely in charge. Okay. Now, he said that once they got the suits off with the metal shears, that the overall azimuth width of the material was less than a sheet of newspaper. And, of course, that's the same claims that come out of the Roswell crash with the ship metal in a lot of cases, the outer crust of it, right? So the story kind of goes away. After the 56-second True Magazine article comes out by Kahn, it's kind of dead for a while. And then around the early 70s, when television kind of went to the next level, you get Leonard Nimoy's History's Mysteries and that kind of stuff. It resurfaces again. But at that point, it's sort of being reborn in the consciousness of man. And so we actually are allowing new things to enter in that are actually old. And of course, as most of us realize that we're born before the internet, or we lived a pretty good life before the internet existed, the amount of information you could get, even in rumor, was television. That was about it. Or your uncle told you some weird story or something like that. I had a friend of mine who said that his father had worked in Area 51 as a contractor. He was a painter. That's all he was. And he said that he had told his nephew, I guess, he goes, one day we're up in the girders up above and we're painting, lights on and everything good. And he goes, suddenly the doors open up. And of course we just look down and they usher in a vehicle, a pretty huge vehicle, into the room and shut the door and walk off. It's always lit for security reasons. And he goes, they didn't know we were up there the whole time. I think it's a fascinating story. So from the 70s to the 80s, you basically have all of these UFO organizations that are sort of embedding this story in their speeches. Not a whole lot of folks do a lot of research on it. In 1987, there's another push to get the story back out and revalidated. But it didn't offer much. And then this couple, the Ramses couple, but they start trying to, grab onto things that are, well, you can't prove this doesn't exist, so therefore, it might have existed. And that's really one of the most flimsy ways to try to push something forward. I don't personally trust any folks that are coming out trying to monetize anything, right? But Aztec, New Mexico, finally, in 1997, many years after this, they have their first UFO symposium. And apparently that met annually from 1997 to 2011. And I guess it's not going anymore. In 2007, though, at one of the most conclusive sites where they think this thing actually landed, which is odd because it's a big clearing underneath where they said this vehicle was, and nothing's really grown the entire time since this sighting. And so they, obviously that, maybe the electromagnetic disturbance underneath the vehicle may have just obliterated all biomatter underneath, and so any seedlings, any weeds just don't grow there anymore. And I did see a video where a gentleman who was, again, a hearsay guy who did a lot of research on this, took a reporter out there and was saying, it's pretty much right there. And they showed the whole area, and there's definitely blotches that don't grow, but this is a pretty big spot where it doesn't grow. But that might be the reason why it was selected in the first place. Could just be an organic problem with the ground and the soil there, and so logical place. But the stories of where this thing were actually pretty tight, I will say. You didn't have one guy saying it was over in Albuquerque, another guy says it's in, Dallas, Texas. It was in this one little Hart Valley here, this Hart Canyon. So because the government potentially takes something away, any semblance of historical truth vanishes. That's just how we roll. You got to have some physical evidence. Outrageous claims require outrageous evidence, right? And so anybody who saw this, well, they're long dead because it was a long time ago. I mean, they'd have to be sentient at 48. You'd probably be 15 to 20 years old, and now you got to fast forward 80 years. And so attrition's going to get you. Now, there's no claim, as far as I know, of anyone dying of any radiation poisoning or any immediate sickness in the area, which I think is kind of interesting. But what's interesting is I've created this show for 11 years now, and I've asked searches on the internet and the new AIs out there, just give me some topics, give me some new things I haven't covered. I'll even tell it what I've covered so it doesn't give me the same thing. And this has never come up. It's even as a fraud, even as a complete hoax, it's never come up, which I just think is kind of funny. Now, then again, when you look at the Disclosure Project interviews that Stephen Greer did, Dr. Stephen Greer, out of probably 100 interviews, I'm going to give credibility to about 3 or 4. And that's fine with me, because if 3 or 4 are pretty good, then you have to ask yourself the question, was it Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins has come out and said twice in 2 different interviews that a friend of his who's a manager or producer or agent or something in music has transformed in front of him into a lizard. And he did it again later, and his comment to that guy was, why are you doing this? This is not exactly what I want to see right now. It's just disturbing. And he said that the dude told him, and they're friends, by the way. Of course, he won't name the person. He says, I just want you to know it's real and that we're here. Billy Corgan, he has a new show on YouTube, which is actually very phenomenal. He doesn't strike me as a guy that needs to be famous like that. He's not saying that because he wants to be grilled by that. But now he's been he was on, I think, Joe Rogan's show the second time, and he was on Howard Stern the first time. Well, that's the kind of weird thing that sticks in your head, right? Is Billy lying? Or is he he's a non-drug guy his whole life. He pretty much was the inventor of grunge. He had invented that style, and a producer jumped from him to Nirvana and gave Nirvana the style. And he says, I won't sue you, but you're going to give me a record deal. And that's how he got his life started, by his own admission. So what's interesting about this whole thing is that, for those of you who are longtime listeners, you've heard some of this before, but it might be interesting to hear it again. What's really crazy about this is that I don't hear this stuff repeated much. So what's really interesting is that they always tell you there's a lot of interest in UFOs and that kind of stuff. I don't really think there is. Even the Tic Tac and the Gimbal really didn't get that much press after they were said to, be interstellar vehicles or whatever. And I don't really see people talking about it much. Now, obviously, channels on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and that kind of stuff, they talk about it at length because there are people like me and like you, potentially, that are interested in it. I set out, for those newcomers, to prove that the Roswell incident was complete balderdash, as they might say in the 40s. But it wasn't real. I had written articles online stating, this is a way of potentially doing a psyop on your your fellow enemy on Earth, right? So you're one country and you want to make another country think you've actually got recovered UFO technology. And so you create these stories. And then I went and did my research. But before I did my research on Roswell, I put down some ground rules. And I basically said, look, I don't want to hear any like fifth generation story. I want to hear as much as possible from the actual source. And at the time, there was a lot of great videos on YouTube from the source, right? Jesse Marcel being one of them. His son has come out since then, and he's in his 70s now. He finally wrote a book about it. And then I found other interviews with Marcel's friends. Then there's the coroner. Well, I shouldn't say that. He was a mortician. Glenn Dennis, mortician. And then there was Gerald Anderson, who was 8 years old, and he was actually at the site. And then there's the archaeologist, Professor William Bill D. Hart, who brought students to the Roswell crash. And so this Gerald Anderson and his uncle and his father and his cousin were at the site first. And then this archaeologist shows up with students because they had seen something go down the night before. And so that testimony was pretty interesting. We'll go into all this here because we want to contrast the Aztec crash and the claims and the lack of information with how unbelievably rounded the Roswell crash was. There was also a receptionist at the hospital, the military hospital, where they were doing the autopsies on the 2 dead aliens, because there was 3. And someone told her, hey, you want to see something interesting? They took her down the hallway, opened the door, said, don't come inside. They pulled up the sheet, showed her the alien, put it down. She went home and told her sons and her husband, who then blabbed at school, and they had black suits at their house, MIB people saying, you screwed up. You need to shut up. And then she suddenly died in a hotel, or I should say motel room, registered to her sister having taken drugs and drank too much. She didn't have any history of either one of those. She's a mother of 2. Being away from the house didn't make any sense, and it's pretty conclusive she was bumped off. And the information about her is her best friend, who sat down and took an interview probably in the 80s in this old, 80s house, probably even 50s house, and started sobbing uncontrollably that she thought her government had killed her best friend. These aren't people that think they're lying, right? So let's rewind here, right? Now, the only common theme that has introduced itself, I think, in the last 15 years, and it really came out of Dr. Stephen Greer, was that the government had several radar facilities all over America, and that anything that's being tracked, they would just beam radar at it, trying to figure out what it was, right? And you get an echo back, and they look it up in a book, and they're like, oh, that's probably this, it's one of ours, or whatever. And that process disturbs the actual electromagnetic field around the craft, causing these things to crash. But according to Bob Lazar, after 10 years of chewing up his story and discovering, I think, 8 new craft at S4, he claimed that everything looked like it got hit by a missile, not just some radar. I'm just saying, right? So heavy storms happening in New Mexico, summertime, 1947. And William Mac Brazel owns some land. Mac is his nickname. And he goes out the next morning after this big electrical storm and finds a craft that's crashed. And it's blown out one side of the craft, supposedly. Those facts about the craft state are the only thing that is... I don't think there's any contradictory stories, but it's always the least described part about the entire story. But they did say that this Gerald Anderson kid, who was 8 years old, he said it looked like, one part of it was blown out. But he finds all of these parts all over his land that then lead him to the crash, which I think is interesting because the craft, I believe, was on the estimated average size was 25 to 30 feet in diameter, which, sounds about right for 3 occupants inside. But this Gerald Anderson kid and this Dr. Bill DeHart, who was a archaeologist. I mean, we're talking about a fairly academic kind of guy. I think he spoke like 7 languages. They eventually, tracked him down. He didn't come until second, but the Gerald Anderson and his family showed up, and they had found this craft. They had found one living alien about 3.5 feet. It was the Zeta Articula, almond eye character. And he was taking care of two of his comrades. One had been burned up so bad that it was just without a doubt was gone. And the second one was injured and dying. And he had put down some foil so that they could lay on these things. And he was just waiting for whatever was going to take place. And the Gerald kid said, look, I was 8 years old. But he goes, this stuff just got burned into my memory. He goes, I saw the guy walk and sit down. But he goes, I didn't think he was real. So I walked over to him and I sat down next to him. Imagine an 8-year-old's potentially around the same size, a little taller. And he goes, I put my right hand on his thigh and he jumped. And he goes, that's when I realized this wasn't a toy. He goes, I don't know why I thought it was a toy. It didn't look human, wore a little suit. And he goes, I couldn't believe it. I jumped up, ran behind my father's leg, and just like a little kid does, he's just looking. And the father's trying to communicate with the one alien and trying to maybe speak a couple different languages, but how absurd is that, right? That's when the archaeologist shows up, and of course he's got students with him. He said they had seen it fall out of the sky, or at least they thought they had seen it, which pointed him in that direction. Archaeologists are extremely meticulous. They grid out a area of land. They meticulously dig in the grid, and they're documenting everything they find. So, a very analytical dude, right? He's got the PhD and he's teaching it, so we'll give him some credit. He attempts to speak several languages. Nothing's working. Then a Jeep shows up, and it's an African-American gentleman and a redheaded Caucasian guy. And the way that the Anderson kid said, he goes, all I remember was saying dirty words was not something that was allowed in my family. And he goes, the redheaded guy was absolutely silver-tongued, yelling at everybody. And he said the African-American gentleman was extremely polite. And he goes, so we're all kind of like going towards that guy. It's kind of good cop, bad cop on steroids. And the Jeep was big enough that they had forced them all to kind of climb in this thing. And then he drove them north on the highway, the closest highway. The archaeologist is saying, I don't want to get in this vehicle. If you want me to leave, that's just fine. I'll give you my credentials. I'm right down at this motel. We're digging in the area, easy to find us, blah, blah, blah. I got students I'm responsible for. You can't just take us away. He wouldn't have any of it. Pushed him in the vehicle. They all go north. He says, by the time they get north, the Anderson kid said, he goes, I've never seen more military personnel. They had landed gigantic vehicles, aircraft on the highway, and just operations were unfolding. Sort of like a Close Encounters kind of thing, right? Just remember, Roswell comes first, Close Encounters comes second. Kid got, I guess the parents got debriefed a little bit. Don't say anything, yada, yada. We'll be in touch. He said the kid got in the back seat. Of course, there's no seat belts, big bucket seats in there. And he says, I'm looking at the back one. And he goes, the only thing I can see is the archaeologist pointing his finger in the face of the redheaded guy, reading him the riot act about, you can't keep us here kind of thing. Most likely he's saying something on the order of, I pay my taxes, you can't do this to me, right? Now fast forward. You got this guy named Jesse Marcel, which I've seen interviews with this guy all the way up until his passing, and you talk about all I can say is like a sweetheart. Like, he's not one of these manipulative guys. He's not throwing it down in ways that seem like a trained psyop guy. He's just telling you the truth. Now, back when I did my episode a long time ago, I put 10 links in my description of what I used to come up with the episode. 2 or 3 years later, I went back and clicked them because I wanted to download them, and 50% of the channels have been terminated. Terminated as if they released government secrets, right? Really odd. Like, video being deleted, I totally get that. Maybe they re-smithed it or whatever, but these things have been terminated. Who would terminate their YouTube channel? Even if you die, why do it, I mean, if I croak today, no one's going to delete the YouTube channel of Deep Thoughts Radio. It's just going to be up there forever until the company goes out of business, right? What will my family do with the $25 a month I make from this? But Jesse is assigned to picking up a lot of the debris. Now, of course, soldiers are all over the land once they figure out what actually took place. So this Mac dude is like, yeah, sure, take everything out. And I guess Mac was the guy that actually contacted the authorities. Maybe they saw it go down too, not sure. Of course, Dr. Stephen Greer is like, oh, they saw it and they hit it with the special RCA radar and knocked it out of the sky. Well, according to the archaeologist, the storm itself was so visceral and so formidable, it struck the vehicle and knocked it out of the sky. I have a really hard time believing any of this stuff with radars and that kind of thing, simply because the Van Allen belts and a lot of electromagnetism that would be in the universe, depending on where these folks might come from, should take a vehicle and absolutely incapacitate it. Plus, electricity should stimulate any field that's already around it. Yeah, I just don't see it penetrating the vehicle. But I'm just a dude talking on YouTube, right? But Jesse was supposed to be running a bridge game that night. Now, my personal experience with bridge games goes like this. One of my grandparents was reduced to one because my grandfather passed away when I was really, really young. But my other grandparents were together for all the way up until the 21st century, born in the 1920s. Bridge was a huge thing. You would throw bridge parties, and someone would host the bridge party. Well, my grandparents had a pretty good front room of their humble little home in Kansas. And so when this happened, all the folding tables came out, the card tables, right, would come out, and they would break into teams, and, you know, there's 2 people on one team, 2 people on the other team, and you host these shows, or these events, right? So Jesse, having picked up a ton of this material and put it in the back of his truck, shows up to the bridge game. The bridge game is made out of all the husbands who work with him at the Roswell Air Force Base. I saw an interview, which is gone now, from a guy just over 80 years old, very lucid man. And he was running the bridge game at, I believe, Marcel's house, or maybe even at his house, because they can switch it up in the last second, right? But Jesse got called out. He brings in a box of all these two different types of what they thought was plastic-based and 2 different metals, including the little I-beam with the glowing letters on it, right? He brings it in, he puts it down, and he goes, look, a flying saucer just crashed. This is debris. I want you guys to see it before it gets taken away. The husbands and wives all got a chance to look at it. This gentleman talking, of which I can't find him, I can't find his name for you. I watched the interview. He said, you know, he was a metallurgist, and he goes, look, I could see one of the black plastics looked like some stuff potentially we have here on Earth, but he goes, the alloys were totally strange, and this beam that had writing stuck in it that glowed like a purplish kind of glow, very faint, not just like a neon or something like that, but very faintly had a glow to it. He goes, this stuff was out of this world. And one of them is, of course, the foil that when you take a piece of it and you scrunch it up and you let it go, it folds back out to its shape. And of course, people talked about shooting bullets to this kind of stuff, shooting bullets at it. One of the metal was bent, but you couldn't change its shape. There's nothing you could do to dent it. So one of them was pliable and one was stuck. So he's showing it to them, and they're all okay. The funny thing is, they're totally okay with the fact that an alien craft had crashed. Finally, it's here, kind of thing, right? He says, that's nothing. Come out to the truck. So they all file out the house and they go to the truck. And this is all via the testimony of a first-hand guy. And he goes, he had pretty huge pieces back there. And that's when they started seeing the other types of metals, right? He says they all went to work the next day. And of course, Jesse's flying to the Texas to go for the fake press conference that it was nothing more than a weather balloon. And of course, the guys at the base are all the weather balloon experts. They don't actually know, because there's no internet where you get live feeds and that kind of stuff. They don't know the fraud's being perpetrated in Texas. But he said that box was right there on the central desk of our room. Kind of like a classroom, except for instead of having desks where the students are, we all have our own desks. And we work together in this big room. And he goes, it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and he goes, by noon, the MIB dudes show up and say, you're all sworn to secrecy. And I believe it was either 20 to 50 year gag on this whole thing. Very interesting. Did you ever hear that part of the story when you watched History's Mysteries or any of that kind of stuff? But Jesse also, that same night, actually this guarantees that it was actually hosted at this guy's house, because Jesse took a bunch of this back home, woke his son up, I believe it was around 12, who's now he's a pilot. And he showed his son this stuff. And he says, son, you're never going to see this stuff ever again. I wanted you to see it. And of course, Jesse then takes the material back to the authorities. And the interesting thing about that is that all of it was boxed up into little boxes, and it was being shipped to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But the first jaunt was to take it from Roswell to Texas, like the Dallas area, like Fort Worth area, wherever that Air Force Base was at the time. And one of the guys that was one of the loading dock guys, or loading dudes, he worked at Roswell. When you detach from Roswell on a trip like that, you get reattached wherever you land. You got to do whatever they say, and then you get detached, and you go back home, and you get reattached, right? I'm probably using attached incorrectly, but that's generally the authoritative gist of his day. He said, I'm lifting boxes that feel like they have air in them. He goes, I thought this might be a joke. And we were big, giant, long pieces and then little boxes. And he goes, I'm watching us take this off and put it on a plane to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. All the debris is going that way. And somehow inside, all of the debris in front of the press, right? The weather balloon pieces. The cover story they've hatched in the last 20 years is that it was a weather balloon that was designed to see whether or not the Soviets were detonating atom bombs. That electromagnetic EMP wave that comes off of such a thing would actually hit these very sensitive sensors on the balloon, and then we'd know that had occurred. Okay. Then we have Glenn Dennis. Glenn Dennis was a mortician in the area outside of the base. He was always on call to handle any, unfortunate events. And there had been a fighter pilot that had gone down a couple weeks before the Roswell crash, and he participated in obviously the embalming or whatever that was available at that time with his body. I don't know anything about that, but he gets a call from someone in the military that basically says, hey, do you have any caskets for children? And he says, well, I've got, I think he said he had one or two. It's not something you carry a lot, right? It's hopefully a very unfortunate circumstance. And they said, well, okay, we're going to send a guy over to come get him. But in addition, what do we do to actually preserve a body? Like, what do we do? And he says, well, I'm not a pathologist. You should probably contact one. Just cool it off. Just keep it as cold as possible until you figure out what the heck you're trying to do with whatever you have. He said they came and got it and took off. Now he's curious. He's got base pass. He goes into the base and he goes to the hospital. He walks in the back door. A female friend of his almost immediately comes out of a door of a side room to a hallway, and she pukes in a trash can. And he looks up at her like, whoa, what's going on? And she basically is just kind of like getting her grip on herself. And she's like, just go, you need to leave. Just leave. You and I will have breakfast and I'll tell you all about it. But just, you need to go right now. Like, read my face. You need to get out of here. Now, they meet at a diner. And of course, she's not quite herself. She tells him, look, I wasn't puking because what I saw was gross. I was puking because what we were doing an autopsy on, as I was an assistant, this woman, was full of sulfur. We cut this being open. It vaporized, aspirated some sulfur into the air, and that was making everybody sick. And he goes, well, what are you talking about? And she pushes across the table a little sketch of pieces and parts, especially the fingers, the overall proportion of the body. And she says, look, man, that article that was printed in the local Air Force newspaper about a disc crashing, it's real. And I was part of the autopsy group on this thing. And he's like, whoa. So she says, look, we got to be careful about meeting at all, because she was feeling the heat. Obviously, they debriefed her quite a bit about the sensitive nature of the information. They meet one more time, and then she's transferred to the UK on some secret operation or something. And she goes, look, I'm going to get transferred, and I'm going to send you just an incidental postcard. Just send something back. Don't say anything. Just send something, hi, good, so glad you're doing great, and all this other kind of stuff. So she gets over there and sends him a postcard. Well, then she doesn't send him anything else ever again. And he uses proper channels to find out where she is. It's a friend of his. And they said she died in some operation over there. Now, the thing about Glenn is that he didn't think she was murdered. He just thinks she was erased, which I find interesting. Now, I've heard claims that he changed his story over the years, and nothing, there's probably at least 3 or 4 super detailed interviews where he says the whole story all over again. He never, ever, ever changed his story, from what I could tell. Balbazar, not so much. But Glenn's pretty solid. Now, some of the more interesting things on the Marcel side is both Jesse himself and his son. I saw an interview with Jesse, and there are fragments of this interview online, but they've cut out a very important piece of the interview. I cannot find this original interview anymore, and the channel that had it has now been terminated on YouTube. I'm not trying to sensationalize anything. You've heard me say this story before if you are a long-time listener, but I can't find it. If you find this footage, send it over, put it in a comment somewhere so I can get another copy of this. As far as I could tell, they had taken Jesse out to where he thought the vehicle was. I would always rely on Jesse's, approximation of where this thing was. I mean, it's part of the Mac Ranch, so I don't know why it's being contested so much. But he said that he was, at one point in time, saddled with being with the surviving alien for a short period of time while they were bringing in and out resources. And he had some alone time. It doesn't sound like it needed to be anything more than a minute or 2. He is out there as an old man. And you just watch the interview with him, and you're talking about a guy that believed in his government, who believed in America, did not, wasn't a liar, wasn't a snake oil salesman guy, wasn't polished at all. And he told the story that he was looking down at the alien and he could feel this dread from the alien. And he goes, all I can tell you was he was contemplating the fact that he was stuck here. And then he said that the alien looked up at him and realized that he was being listened to. And he stared those big eyes at me and he said, don't worry, no one's coming for us. I mean, that's huge. I mean, I guess if you had to get stuck somewhere for the rest of your life, being on a peaceful planet that hopefully won't cut you up until you're dead, maybe that'd be interesting. I don't know. If you go to Mars and you meet the Ray Bradbury Martians up there, as long as they don't see you as a threat and you can hang out in their city until you croak, I guess you'd be all right. But that's pretty intense. That's a cathartic moment for any being, no matter where you come from. But Jesse tears up in this interview. You could see his eyes start glowing with tears. It's not like they run down his face that I can remember, but he was feeling that all over again in this interview. And I can't find it anymore. I can find bits and pieces of it. I can't find the whole thing. Now, Jesse's son, whose name escapes, he might be Jesse Jr., I'm not sure. He wrote a book, I think, when he turned 70. And the book is actually fascinating, really, in 2 accounts, I would say. One, he confirms most definitely seeing the material. He said, my father didn't even talk about it with me until like the late 70s. I mean, like this happened, hush, hush, let's not talk about it. Now, the rumor is that they actually, and I would too, hid a few of the pieces somewhere. So who knows? The government's pretty good about finding those things, but hidden in plain sight, maybe you won't find it, I don't know. But his son said that for years after this situation, he goes, by the 80s, get this, man. I mean, 80s? That's 40 plus years ago. He said he would get a phone call once a year from some random stranger. And he goes, by the time phone numbers were unlisted and it was really not possible just to know where he was, and he goes, I'd move and I'd change my number and they'd always know how to call me up. He said, someone would say, aren't you Jesse Marcel's son, getting the ID? And he goes, yes, I am. And he goes, well, you said you saw these various pieces and parts with your father, right? Yes, sir. Well, don't you think it could have been one of these other things? And they start mentioning weird toys. The I-beam with the writing on it, they tried to tell them that it was some decorative tape with flowers on it. Absurd things from people that weren't even born when this whole thing happens, right? I always find it amazing. They're educating all the LLMs that, you know, people that weren't there are the highest authorities on any subject matter in the world. Bought and paid for narratives, folks. So he said that he would get this once a year for decades and decades and decades. Does that sound like an event that never occurred? Right? Does anyone really care? I mean, are there like Roswell youth groups out there? No, nobody cares, man. One of the most significant events in human history, nobody cares about. Old people care about it. Maybe MUFON people in their 50s and 60s and 70s care about it, but no one below cares about it. The kids today are probably just going, whatever. They're indifferent to it. Yeah, sure, whatever. Let me check my phone, see if I got a red dot somewhere, you know? So I'm going to put something at the end of this show, which I've debated for months of even mentioning in this episode, or any of these kind of episodes. But I was just recently talking to a friend of mine who has, I guess, similar category experiences in her background. And so I'm just thinking about it, thinking, you know, I want to share something that I think I might have experienced, but I want to preface this whole thing. The couple events I've had, which I've mentioned several times on the show. One, meeting, I believe, a gray back in, was it 1990, Christmas, in a beach house in Oxnard, California, where I woke up. This is one I think absolutely took place because of the succeeding facts about the event. I'm staring at a gray. I'm on a beach house. I'm three houses from the beach, sand, in Oxnard, off Seaward exit. I'm staring at a dude. And I'm coming to in the middle of an event. Like the program's already been in session, right? And I feel kind of melancholy as I'm kind of like coming back into my consciousness. And this dude in front of me, well, the way that what I'm seeing is this: a wall on my right. I'm sitting on an amplifier that I used for my guitar and keyboard at the time, which is our Christmas tree. My girlfriend is asleep in the next room. There's a sofa behind this guy, and there's a wooden table off to the left, up against the window, and 10 feet out the window is the next house, right? But volumetric lights coming in that window, just like some damn movie. And there's about 3 or 4 folks, more grays, looking at a puzzle we're building on that table. The table was a table we got in a box. We put it together, varnished it, sanded, varnished it, put it together. I don't even remember where the hell we bought it, but they're looking at the puzzle. And one dude's zipping around the room. He comes by about every 3 or 4 seconds, and they seem to be moving faster than the dude in front of me, which means I'm probably moving, I guess, very slowly. And he puts his right hand on my left shoulder, right here. I could feel him touching me. And this is like a situation where I'm remembering it for the rest of my life, like I'm going to the Smithsonian for the very first and last time in my entire lifetime, right? If I went and saw the Eiffel Tower, it'd be like that. It'd be like, I'm not probably going to come back here, but wow, cool, But he puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Are you going to be all right?" And I'm in the middle of consciousness where I don't remember what happened before that, but what I said next seemed like we were having a conversation prior. And I said, "Well, I guess," I said, "but no one's going to believe me." And he goes, what would make them believe you, right? For all the old time listeners, I apologize for telling the story again, but I got a new one for you after this. And he reaches down between my legs and he pulls up a present. It's a perfect square. It's very thin. And he goes, if I told you what was in this present, would they believe you? And I'm like, what? And I look at it, I'm like, that's an album. I know it's an album. This is what my girlfriend got me back in those days. She just got me a whole slew of them 4 months earlier for my birthday. I'm excited to see what album that is. She just came back from New York, where she gets all these cool albums. I said, yeah, sure, whatever. And he goes, it's origami paper. Puts it down between my legs. Now, at that point, I'm thinking, well, you're wrong. You have to be wrong. But I closed my eyes. And my eyes, just like a blink, down and up. And now I'm laying on my side. It's 1200 on the clock. And I don't remember going in the room. I don't remember dreaming, and I always dream. And I got up and I walked outside into the front room, my skivvies. She's doing a dish. She's cleaning a dish. And I sat down in front of this thing. I'm looking, I'm going, that's an album. And then I grabbed it, and it was soft, like paper. And that's what it was. I told her, you won't believe me, but an alien told me it was in this thing. And her only reply to me was, well, they better not have told you what's in your big gift. Okay, so the old timers, you're like, whew, that story again. And then in Huntington Beach, probably around, I don't know, 2018 to 2019, somewhere in there, I had a whole nother encounter where the insanity, which I always thought was crazy. Now, I just told you about the Glenn Dennis meeting with the girl at the diner, right? One of the things that was on the piece of paper, and it's been scanned a bunch of times, it's in a lot of the videos online, was that the Greys have these little tiny recessed, very recessed suction cups about a centimeter back from the tip of their finger. And I always thought, that's evidence this is a fake. Like, that's just in every sci-fi movie, suction cup aliens and that kind of stuff. Okay, well, I'll make this story really short. Thought I saw some really arc welding light land in my backyard, or just basically descend. I could see it through the blinds with the little holes that hold up the blind, the strings that make the blinds go up, you know. These back door opens up, big heavy door, unlocks, these dudes are coming into my house. I'm thinking, oh my God. And I am fully awake, man. The light's on. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is nuts. Like, who is this, right? And for some reason, they were basically letting me know, you're okay, we're coming. And I'm like, there's no way I could be staring at my bedroom door with the light on. I had flannel sheets, remember that? And just watch them walk in the door. It's going to be too disturbing. So I closed my eyes and I put my hand out and I just basically tried to beam at them like, look, just touch, let's start really calm. Okay, just touch my hand. And I sat there. I wasn't the slightest bit tired. And these little tiny fingers touched 3 of mine. So I got 4 fingers out as a human being. They have 3, right? And these little coarse fingers make very light contact with my fingers. And so I'm feeling good. I feel like they're sedating me or something, right? And so I pull up and I'm pulling on the dude's fingers and he's pulling on mine. They're strong little fingers, man. You could sense they were smaller and nubbed. But as his fingers made it up a centimeter, there's those freaking suction cup things. They're really shallow, super shallow, probably no more than a centimeter in diameter. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, like, really? These things are real? They really have suction cup things? Anyway, they crawled on my bed and I was looking at this dude like 18 inches from my face for a full-blown conversation. I had just put the Sid Mead tattoo on my right wrist and I hadn't had the HB1 on my left wrist yet. And I said, look, this is my friend's name over here. And he's touching it, man. Like, you don't get touched in dreams, man, right? And I said, maybe you could put your name over here, right? He's touching. He has no idea what the hell I'm saying. The reason why I'm bringing those two up is the idea of how the sedation mechanism works, right? How did I remember that? How did I remember the end of one and the beginning of another? Because that's the chronology of it all. I'm just going to tell you, I had this epiphany. You know, that's all I can say, is that this is something they do to you. They erase your memory. It's not an MIB wand. It's not the ruler with the little shiny end on it, like Willie Strieber said in his books, where they touched it between your eyes and then poof, you get the MIB thing. It's some sedation frequency that they put on you. But if they don't erase everything, then there's something left over. And then, over the last 2 years, okay, and there's a big punch to one of these, right? First story I'm going to tell you, you're going to laugh. The second one is, oh my goodness, if you're so much as an engineer, you're going to love this, okay? It's the second one I really want to tell you about. But imagine they get you completely wiped out. They do take care of you from start to finish. But you recall it somehow, right? And it could be self-delusional crap, but this one's good. If this one is a self-delusion, then I'm going to pat myself on the back for this technology that I was shown, that I have never heard prophesied by anyone, okay? I start kind of remembering certain events, right? And it's almost as if when you get the thread in the sweater, you could pull that damn thing out and whatever. There's a whole bunch of things that you remember. It's strange, right? I remember, okay, this is going to sound absolutely nuts. I remember landing, or I remember getting out and them showing me where I was. And it was like this crazy kind of sort of capsule coffin thing. It was like almost shaped like a kidney or something. It was like so I could get in a fetal position in it. And they showed me after I got out. They didn't get me out of it. Like I remember looking down at it going, man, I'm glad I did not wake up in this thing, man. This would have been claustrophobia to the maximum, right? They put me on this kind of gurney attached to like a conveyor mechanism of sorts. It wasn't quite big enough for me, the problem was. And I'm not a gigantic guy, but I got in this thing and they want me to lay down in it. So I'm just appeasing them, right? And it's one crew at the bottom and another crew at the top. And so I get in this thing and I'm having to kind of crunch down in it, and there's no cushion in this thing, really. So it's going up this sort of, 20-degree incline. And I remember looking over to the left. There was a wall on my left, looking to my right. There's a wall on my left. And I'm looking, and it's just kind of like this wild pattern wall. It's more like sort of like a stone, kind of an orange, yellow, tan stone. But I go all the way to the top and it unloads at the top and there's a bed up there. It's a black floor. It's got these sort of almost Art Deco walls where they're of this stone, this kind of, I don't know what you would call it. It's almost like the Tatooine, Mos Eisley kind of walls, but a little more yellow. But every 18 inches or so, and I do a lot of 3D rendering, so my brain's pretty attuned to dimensions, there's an inlet with sort of some light in it, just kind of strip light in it, right? And it goes up 18 inches, probably reached about 8 feet. And there's a medical table in the center of the room. Looks clean, looks almost like just wrapped leather-ish kind of table. And over to the, so I'm coming out, let's say the south wall. In the northeast wall is where these grays are. And they're all different heights. And this is what's interesting. I just told my friend this story, and then I just heard this Virgil Armstrong guy say that the taller guy had higher rank. I think I was like, whoa, I just said this to a friend of mine when I recalled this story in private, right? The taller they are, the older they are, and the more authority they have. Now, the problem is I'm getting out of this thing, and they want me to lay down on the table, and I have no problem with that. I don't get any threatening vibes from these folks. But I got to piss bad. I've been in this ship. Now, what happens when you're in a dream and you've got to go to the restroom? Like, you got to pee. For me personally, having studied thousands and thousands of my dreams, I never fully relieve in the dream. In fact, the dream usually makes me wake up. You go to a bathroom, you start unloading if you're lucky, and luckily you don't pee yourself in real life. And then it just never finishes. You can go forever and you never feel relieved, right? And then you finally wake up and you go to the restroom, right? So I'm looking around, I go, I got to pee. I'll get on your table, but I got to pee, right? And I'm looking around, there's nothing to pee in, right? I don't get the sense they do it. I don't know. So I just walked over to the corner, in the southeast corner here, and right at one of the ridges, it's sort of at my height to urinate, and I release into this corner. I'm just using the trough of this sort of inlet, which goes in and down, and I relieve myself in this corner. And I felt great. I felt perfect. And I came back, and a shorter dude runs up. And actually, when I said I had to do it, they kind of freaked out because I was talking. And the big guy goes, no, this is what they do. Just let him do it. That's what he says. He goes, just let him do it. Sorry, I forgot that part. So I go relieve myself, and I pull back, and I'm about to walk around the left side of the table where they are. And I look over, and this little dude comes over, and he's staring at my stuff in this drain. He's looking over at the other guy like, what do I do? Like, this is not supposed to be here, right? And I was kind of like, sorry, buddy. I was literally kind of a comical moment. So I lay down. Whatever they do, I'm out. Then I wake up, and I'm sitting on the table. Can't believe I'm telling you guys this stuff. So, same group of dudes, full continuity. What do dreams do? If you walk in a room and walk out a room and try to come back in that room, it's rarely the same design, right? It changes. Your brain changes everything, right? This thing was a rock solid reality, okay? So they asked me, the main guy asked me, he goes, is there anything else you want to see before you go back? And this is the cool thing, man. This is cooler than cool. I said, I want to see how you guys build your ships. And a bunch of the little guys said, no, we can't do that. Like, it was one of these feelings of, we don't have any authority. They're talking to the big guy, right? Like, we don't have any authority to do that. And the guy, I swear to God, he put his hand up to shut him up. And he goes, it's okay. We'll work on this, right? So then I kind of black out, almost as if you can't see where we're going, right? This might be a little overwhelming for you. So we're going to get you to a safe place where we can continue walking and you can continue to be conscious. But obviously I was walking like some robot or something in between. Now I'm walking, and the thing is, I'm recalling this to you like what I did yesterday, you know? I'm going down a corridor, big giant wall, probably 20 feet. I didn't see the top of it. Pretty big wall on the right. But there's an opening that's like an L-shaped. It goes boom and goes left around the corner of this big wall that's on my right, which I never get quite completely past it. I get almost to it. There's a big staircase going up about 10 feet on my right, but right in front of me is this fabrication station, okay? It's a cylinder that's probably about 3 feet off the ground, about 3 feet in diameter, and there's dudes standing around it. Now the doctors, I'll just call them that, are standing off to the right, and they're looking at me. They're kind of looking at what's going on. They're looking at me like, what's he going to do when he sees how this works? All right, so here's the cool thing. I see a blob of this dark chrome metal drop from the ceiling, and it goes boink right on top of that cylinder. Now, if the cylinder's 3 feet in diameter, again, I do 3D all day long. I'm really good at dimensions. This thing might have landed about 8 inches in diameter, but it's about 1.5 inches thick, and it's moving, it's oscillating, it's spinning. Then all of a sudden, it compresses, and it turns into the bottom half of a ship. Just all the contours and everything. Suddenly I realize I'm looking at an electromagnetic field that is actually a part of why the cylinder is there. It is harnessing the field. I don't know if there's any field from above. I didn't get the sense of that. But the same exact gravity well technology you would use to fly is being used to fabricate. This metal stays in its absolute molten state. Its thermal release is almost zero. So I'm not getting a glow off the thing, right? So I see this compression and this beautiful bottom half of the hull. As far as size-wise goes, it's not as big as I would have thought it would have been. Probably 20 feet, 25 feet, sort of what's going on. Now from above, that staircase goes up a 10-foot wall, and I can see black up there, like it's another room up there. It's another floor up there. So now I'm staring at the bottom half of this vehicle. It's just, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's just spinning, and it's cool looking. Here comes a prefabricated deck with the seats on it, with the propulsion system in it. I'm not saying it's all Bob Lazar's thing, but it would have been underneath this plate. It comes over with like some sort of crane or something, and it comes down and it's let down right into the bottom part of the ship. Then from the left side around the corner, I can finally start to see half of it. They have done the same exact thing with another blob that made the top half of the ship. And it's in its electromagnetic state. And it comes around and it literally rotates over and touches these three pieces, right? So you got the bottom, you got the full fabricated inside, and then you have the top that lands on top. And all of a sudden they release the field and the whole thing welds together like it's one piece. My mind was blown. I got, well, here's the weird thing. I mean, this is the new sort of technology that I think I might have discovered. It's not new technology, but it's me understanding potentially how is that embedded in my long-term memory at photoreal levels such that, I mean, I could have drawn it the second I recalled it. I could draw it to you today. I can 3D model this. Maybe I'll even attempt it. That'll delay the episode like 5 days. But it also accounts for Bob Lazar, of all people, saying these things look like they're injection molded, like they're all one big piece, like there's no welding seams or anything. Wouldn't it make sense that if you had what I love to call sacred geometry, like the sacred geometry is what I call the algorithm that would be the gravity well around one of these objects, right, to make it have a gravity well and let it fly in certain directions, right, by pushing the universe out of the way. And so you just fall into the hole. I don't remember much after seeing that, but I definitely felt the epiphany when I was looking at it. In fact, just as soon as the bottom went up, if they're looking at me, I don't know if my face registered the absolute amazement of why not use the same exact technology to fabricate? Why not? I mean, you have to have some pretty isolated algorithms to make sure it doesn't just spit out in some other direction, right? If you couldn't seal off the field, right, it might just go and blow up everywhere. But if they exist, and if this is not just some amazing engineering of my imagination into my long-term memory, then wow, it just explains potential fabrication techniques, right? With seamlessness and perfection. It's just like in 3D modeling, we're going from man-made modeling to what Blender 3D calls geometry nodes, where you actually use mathematics to model everything. They've got haunted houses that just look absolutely rancid, and the whole thing is being generated out of math. Not a single human being plotted a single point. Well, okay, so if we're that way in virtual 3D, why wouldn't an advanced society be able to pull that off in a field system, right? The only other things that I have recalled, again, I have no proof. I don't know. I'm the first one to bust my own balls, just say you're full of crap, was waking up inside the vehicles going to and from. You tend to go, all my memories of having the sensation of going to the location, I'm always by myself. And there's this crazy circular indent in what feels like the bottom of the ship or something, but that would seem crazy. You wouldn't want to be by the field, you'd die. Wherever the hell I am, it's in that kind of container, and I can hear the ship a little bit. And I remember waking up on just sort of like a really a bad level of padding, let's just put it that way, not really comfortable, and having this paper thin sheet to pull over myself, and communicating on one occasion, I'm cold, and just getting a burst of like way too much heat, and then being okay with being cold. And the only other return memory that I have is waking up next to a woman in one of these compartments. Seems like the return is always a better vehicle than the departure. Don't know what that would be. But I woke up. It's very dark, but there is some little lights kind of hidden inside the surfaces. You do kind of a little bit of light. It was very low light, and I'm staring at a female brunette in front of me who's in a fetal position, totally out cold. My first instinct as a human being was to say, I'm going to go behind her and comfort her. And then it was like the occupants of the ship just don't do that, because if she wakes up, she's going to beat the crap out of you, and we're going to have a huge problem, trying to keep everybody under control. It's just two of us, right? So I didn't do that. So I feel a little insane telling you that stuff, but that fabrication technique was either just the universe eventually working it out in my own brain of what could be with all this other fanciful story around it, or potentially as a memory of something, I know there's a lot of fear about, governments, trying to say aliens are real and then distracting the entire world into maybe a centralized control system. Believe me, I'm aware of that. I would never want to contribute to that mentality. I know that it's a vogue thing right now to talk about aliens all the time. Tic Tac and Gimbal for me is 100% United States technology. And the other thing I wanted to say to you guys is that the proof that the Tic Tac is ours is shooting it with the Hellfire missile, right? You wouldn't shoot a UFO with a missile unless it had just done something. And then you better damn well hope that you've got technology that can take the thing out. As I said in a previous episode recently, where I showed you the footage where the Hellfire missile, I couldn't remember, I kept saying JDAM, Hellfire missile hits the Tic Tac. It actually did start spinning on its axis, but it kept going in the same direction. But pieces and parts of the Hellfire missile got stuck in the gravity well behind it, right? You would never attack an alien craft just out of thin air, but you definitely would attack your own craft and show the Congress in November of last year, see what we got. When we ask you for Black Ops money, This is what you're paying for. And they just hide it under UAP. Why create UAP in the first place? Honestly, it's a bit of the truth, right? It's not a UFO. It's our technology, and we're calling our technology UAPs. We'll keep UFOs off to the side. Now, can I explain why maybe there are aliens and UFOs, but they never made contact with us? Like the day the Earth stood still and just landed on a baseball field in Washington, D.C.? No, I can't explain why they wouldn't come and just set the record straight. You know, and all these folks in the military and intelligence agencies saying, you know, we're up to like 27 different species. What? The dude who said that during the 2001 Disclosure Project with Dr. Stephen Greer, where he had everyone go up to the podium, that guy rattled that off, and they go, some British guy says, tell me, give me descriptions of 27. Just give me like 6. He couldn't get past 3, I think. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I've got friends that know people in extremely, extremely high places that also say, yeah, they're real, but we don't talk about them, you know. And then it was one of the former presidents had recently said that, oh, they're real, but they're not in Area 51. And they got blown completely out of proportion. I'm no fan of that dude for sure. But I think what he was really saying was he believes that they exist, but they're not here on Earth in any facility. Yeah, you know. They're not going to tell any 4-year term person, you know, Queen's clearance. Why is it called that, right? They're not going to tell any 4-year term person or 8-year term person anything secret. They just won't, right? I think for me, it's just compare notes. Compare notes. You know, I've never heard of any legitimate claim of horrific things happening to folks. What I have heard over and over and over again is people being afraid. When they woke up in these facilities and just not knowing what's going on and just panicking, having no ability to contextualize what they're seeing. And then, of course, they get a PTSD situation when they come back home, especially if all this stuff's being lost in your subconscious. I don't know if, I'll say this. I dream every single night. I dream extremely detailed dreams. I now am up to a point of just having full-fledged conversations with people, you know, where I can look at their face, look away, look at their face, look away for 20, 30 minutes and not know that I'm dreaming at the time. It's not advancing to a lucid dream. But in terms of UFOs, even in my dreams, the only thing I ever have, I've had a couple UFO full-on dreams, absolutely nothing real about it. One was I got fascinated with the Battle for Los Angeles movie. I thought that was well done. Around that time, I was in some naval base, and they had landed on the beach, which is part of that movie. It's a beach invasion of Los Angeles, not a naval base necessarily. And it was wild aliens with guns. And I remember running into a building and finding a building that had a compression chamber in it where you could close the door like a submarine. But it was for some experiment. It had its own environmental system in it. And I said, we'll just hide in here and maybe they just don't make any noise, right? Another one was I was out in the wilderness at inside of a round canopy, almost dome-ish canopy that the government had set up. And they had aliens that had landed in a field that was far away and not too far away, you know, maybe half a mile away or whatever. And they had arranged a meeting. And so here comes the aliens into the room, and total dreamy. It ended in a wild, chaotic thing where something had spooked them, and so there was some sort of battle that was non-bullet battle, but it was some weird thing. But that was all dreamy. It was very non-real, right? But the only other thing I ever have is that I'll be at a location. It's dusky, so it's about sunset. Maybe the sun is even kind of crested and went down off the edge, but it's still lit. And I'll see, you know, amazing craft flying in the air that are unidentified. And then, you know, military craft will chase them or whatever. Very short-lived dreams. We're talking 30-second to 1-minute dreams. So in terms of my dreams being full of aliens or alien craft, not really. I mean, I don't wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, I just talked to a grave for 30 minutes. No, none of that stuff at all. I don't wake up. I don't have asymmetrical dreams where I'm in some, oh, actually, there's one I completely forgot. Oh my God. I owe you guys another story. Holy crap. Okay. This is one of those dreams that's like, I recalled it. This one is very, very solid as well. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to tell you this. So I woke up in a room sitting on a table, and I had these white top and a white bottom that was very kind of, what do you call, Minecrafty, right? It was like very blocky cuts that would kind of fit every human being. And the only thing they had to like worry about was where your waist was, so your shirt didn't go down too far. My shorts are absurd. They're just like white silk. But I wake up in this room, and it's like a bunch of glass offices, basically. The supporting beams were all white. It could be wood, could be metal, don't know. And I'm kind of confused, but I feel really comfortable. It's broad daylight. And I'm looking around this room going, man, but I got my hands on the edge of the desk, right? It's like a desk, right? And I turn around to my left, and to my surprise, standing in the corner of this room at about 7 feet, I think the ceiling's about 8 feet, standard height of a American household, is a female Zeta Articuli, right? They're brown. They're not gray. They're really brown. I mean, this female is standing just stone cold still with those almond eyes and kind of staring at me, but the head doesn't have to really turn at you to make you feel like they totally got you with those eyes, right? And I'm looking back there, and I'm like, and she's just not even holding, she's not moving at all, man. And it's an ominous feeling, man. And so I keep staring, like, what's going to happen here? And so she finally breaks and starts moving in front of me, right? She moves in front of me. She is tall. I can't see massive anatomy. There's no breasts of any kind. I mean, maybe there was, I don't know if there was any nipples on her, but it's this beautiful brown skin, and there's no clothing. There was no spacesuit on this girl. And she basically lets me know, get this, that she wants to do it. And I'm looking at her going, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not your height. This is my stuff. But her torso is really, really long. And so her baby maker is damn near exactly my height when I stand up or when I was leaning out. And I just keep communicating. I don't think this is going to work. I don't know. I don't even know how to start. How would I even do this, right? She reaches down into my shorts. And in so many words, I become able to engage in such activities very quickly. She maneuvers me and her, and I could feel the friction of her hand. I could feel the friction of her body. It definitely was a typical feeling down there. And very instantaneously, I'm done. And she manages to take care of everything that was a byproduct of that event. And then she's like, you can go outside now. And so I'm kind of like, I feel like a dirty boy, right? I walk out the door and I'm just like, that was really weird. There's a bit of a sedation that you're not like in some hyper fear thing. And I get this. I walk out this door, and this starts to look like a very sensible kind of earth architecture. I walk outside, and it's this little tiny sidewalk. Feels like a concrete-y kind of thing. And there's foliage up against the building. Then there's a sidewalk. Then there's the typical barrier you might find at a university, or it reminded me of like an old studio writing nook, like where they have like all the writing offices that are close to each other. It kind of inclines up this way and it kind of goes down that way, not abruptly or anything. It's broad daylight. The center thing has 18 inches you can sit on, some grassy kind of foliage, 18 inches on the other side, then sidewalk, then more foliage, then the other building, and they're mirrored. And they're going all the way up and down. It's just like it's offices, right? It reminds me of like DreamWorks bought an old studio, and I've been on there a lot, quite a few times. It looks like they're writing nooks. Anyway, so I go to the left, and there's a bunch of varying height adult grays. I mean, these are like, we're talking, when you look at something that's 3.5 feet to 3 feet, that's said all the time. I don't think humans really realize how small that is. It's very small. But I go down there, and they kind of like, just like, I mean, it's going to sound stupid, just like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters, where they kind of all kind of up and touched him. There's a couple that kind of guide me, and this is where there's a break in that center medium. There's one, when I walked out of that first chamber, that office or whatever, there's probably about three or more feet to it to my right before it breaks and rounds off with the chair going all the way around. Then there's like, I don't know, 6 feet, and then another one starts and it goes up. You've seen these things all over the world, right? I walk down, and again, bunch of grays. No one's taller than 3.5 feet. And I'm in this goofy outfit, and I sit down, and I'm looking at these massive, almond eyes, man. And there was one, they all feel like adults to me, okay? And so I put my hand out, and this dude puts his hand in mine, and they're tiny, tiny little hands with really long fingers. And I did the thing where I'm just sensing they don't speak. So I gotta everything's gotta be emitted from my thought process, right? So I put my hand out. He puts his hand in mine. I put my hand gently on top of his hand, and I said something in my mind like, it is an absolute privilege to meet you, and something else like, I come in peace, some sort of feeling like that, right? After I said that, the crowd to my right breaks apart a little bit, and little kitties come out. Little, tiny, cute grays, okay? The smallest one was to the left. There's like a 2-column of them, but there's a lot of them. And there's a slightly taller one to the right. And they're doing the same thing the little kids do in our world, where they're kind of like hugging their parents and stuff. But the parents are like, I want you to meet one of these dudes, right? One of these humanoid folks, right? Well, the little kid on my right, he was a little bit taller, probably about 3 inches taller than the kid to his left, still super tiny. He reaches up and touches my knee, my right knee, just boom. And he pulled his arm back like, oh gosh, maybe I'm not supposed to do that. And I looked at him and I said, you could touch me if you want. Oh, wow. That little statement changed everything. All of a sudden, man, this one little kid comes up, and the little tiny one, I did the same hand thing with him, but his little hand was so tiny, man. And he's kind of like happy. Like you could just get this huge lovey feeling with all these folks. And these hands are touching me like crazy now. And again, touching dreams, I don't get it. I don't know about you. I don't get touched. People touch me in dreams, but I don't feel it, right? Sleep paralysis, wake ups, you can kind of feel a little bit, but that's not a dream. That's a weird chemical dump thing. Well, I did what any human being would do. Staring at all this is a little chaotic, right? It's like, I don't know if I can stare at everybody here. So I just closed my eyes, smiled, and just felt this love of all these little hands touching on me. That goes for maybe 20, 30 seconds. Very intense. Very sweet. And then all of a sudden they start peeling off. The amount of touches start going away. To the point I open my eyes and I'm thinking, oh, maybe something else is going to happen here. But most of them are gone. And there's a couple off to my left. And they're doing that thing where they kind of look at you and they're like, we got to go this way. And so I follow the guys to my left, and I end up turning all the way around, which is, I'm looking at really over my right shoulder, but I'm actually looking on my left shoulder. I completely spin like a 180, and they're all over with her. She has walked outside now. She's on the lane to my right, but I'm looking completely over my left, and they're all touching her. They're all kind of huddled next to her and touching her, and she's got her hands kind of spread out a little bit around them, and she is not visibly smiling, right? There's no visible mouth movement, but her soul was glowing, and she's basically telling me straight to my consciousness, these are my children. I made all of them. And that's the last thing I remember. Boom, I woke up. Sorry, I didn't wake up. The vision stops, right? So I don't know where this stuff's coming from. I don't know if there's some beam hitting my head and giving me all these crazy thoughts. I don't know. But it's very beautiful and very peaceful. There's no, Whitley Strieber colonoscopies going on. Just investigating, getting to know each other kind of thing. So there's your bonus round for this particular episode. This is going to give me the heebie-jeebies knowing I published this. But I think one of the takeaways from this is that I think that they start some process where your consciousness doesn't remember what's going on. And maybe it makes it to your long-term memory where you can remember it. I never remembered anything else from Oxnard, never remember anything else from the HB experience. But that was such an intense experience. I've got other episodes to talk about that one. There was a lot of dialogue with that second one. And just looking at an alien so freaking close, I could see how his eyes were made. I actually 3D rendered it in one of the alien episodes. He had razor teeth and all kinds of weird stuff, but it was just peaceful. It's crazy. That was the one in HB. Totally different species. I've never even seen this species drawn anywhere. So I tried to give it some dimension in 3D, although now I could probably take it into AI and get it done quickly. But anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, there's a whole bunch of this crap up there. So get up there, realize that there's the first season on YouTube is on a different channel. There's audio, video, in case you want to listen to this in your car, although there's a lot of pictures and episodes on occasion, so you might miss out on that. There's a store up there with some pretty cool shirts, lots of activity up there. I appreciate you guys picking them up every once in a while, alumni shirts and all kinds of good stuff. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I will see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.